Hello, listeners, and welcome to part 3 of this mini-series on The Work, a group led by Brother Julius. This is Lisa's story, and in part 1, Lisa talked us through how her mother became involved in the work when Lisa was only young. In part 2, Lisa explored her life growing up in the work. In this segment, Lisa explores the various crimes, scandals, and abuses that happened within the work. For full-length, ad-free and early access to these interviews each week for only £1 or $1.50 a month, you can sign up and support the show at patreon.com/The Cult Vault. Now, here is Lisa. So you mentioned that the situation with you and your then husband was that he had experience with sex, but when it came to you two being together, even though you had no knowledge on the subject, he wasn't rough or forceful with you. But if a woman's job was to never say no, there's the potential that there were a lot of women who were subjected to abusive situations.
I would definitely say that's feasible. Yeah, I mean, Joanne, i.e. the Holy Spirit, we didn't really talk much about her, but she was married to Julius, would have meetings with women about how to keep yourself pretty and clean and please your husband. And, it was all news to me. I learned as I went along, but was never really happy. I hope he never hears this podcast. I don't mean to paint him in a bad light. It's just that we were not a good pair. I mean, he's not even really in my daughter's life right now, but and when we split up, I remember he said to me, meeting you was one of the worst things that ever happened to me. He said to me. And I mean, nobody put a gun to our head to get married. It's just that there was nobody to choose from. And again, Julius would use the uh the Bible verse, it's better to marry than to burn. Like, I'm sure that's not really what it's supposed to mean, but you weren't supposed to be lustful. He loved the word lust a lot. He loved the word lust and smut. And the funny thing is, he was full of lust. And he would say that he was demonstrating it. I'm taking on your sin. I'm demonstrating it. That's why he called himself the sinful Messiah. He was above reproach because he was just taking on our sin. And oh, wasn't it a burden? But he wanted to know prurient facts. He wanted to know details of everyone's sex life and if we were happy, if we were pleasing each other. And um I have almost like blackout memories, like moments where I don't recall feeling like a normal wife or being in love or being um the idea wasn't to like in regular life in the world. It's like you get married because you're in love and you have a family and you stay together, ideally because you love being a unit, and that's kind of your life. But in a cult, the family is secondary to the cult, so you're still this little army, but now there's little people involved. And I knew on some very deep intrinsic level what that was going to mean, because I knew how I felt as a youngster growing up in this cult, and I knew how it felt to be propositioned. Something in me, again with the nervousness, was just always nervous that this was going to happen to my daughter. And I wasn't ready to leave until 1992 when she was 4. But when I found out that there was abuse going on, I said, oh, hell no, I'm out of here. And I don't care if I burn in hell. And believe me, it wasn't an easy decision to leave. It was harrowing beyond my ability to describe. I literally thought I was like signing my death sentence, but I was not going to let anyone touch her. I found out that a very close person in my life, who was about 6, was being molested pretty much under my roof, because my mother-in-law and her arranged marriage husband lived upstairs, and they would babysit this child, and he was sodomizing her. And I'll never forget also that day telling my husband about it, and him roaring furiously in anger and making phone calls and screaming into the phone, and me realizing nothing is going to be done about this. As a matter of fact, he was yelled at, like almost like, well, we'll deal with that, but don't question God. Don't make this about the cult. That's just one depraved person, but that depraved person was never even really kicked out. I mean, I'm surprised he wasn't, well, I shouldn't say, but if I was those parents and knew that was going on, I don't think he'd be around to talk about it. But and he had children too, this man. I mean, everyone had children. It was very rare to not have children because I don't think there was no birth control going on. We had to recruit, everybody was a future member.
So when you found out that this situation was taking place, that was kind of like you said that you were already pulling back, but this was sort of like the shelf breaking moment for you, the moment where you were like, this has to stop now.
I remember for some reason, like around 1991, 92, that I would suddenly start skipping meetings, that I would suddenly start smoking cigarettes, that I would suddenly want to wear high heels or black. Like these little weird things would come in, which I tried to tamp down. Um, and I felt so rebellious. I felt so evil that one night I was literally driving to a meeting on my own because my husband stayed back to watch the child. And this is another one of those like just pivotal moments where I'm driving along to a meeting and I just drove another direction and I decided of all things to go to a movie. And I remember the movie, it was Driving Miss Daisy, which is one of my favorite movies. And I sat there in a movie theater by myself, like, I don't want to go to a meeting. I want to watch a movie. Like, can you imagine being that age and for the first time, like, this is my radical act of rebellion, right? Seeing Jessica Tandy in a movie. Um, but then feeling so bad about it and going home and like, James, guess what I did? I didn't go. And guess what? I mean, he must have thought I was doing something terrible or like cheating on him or whatever, but he was like, what? I said, I smoked a cigarette. And he said, I sometimes do too, because again, he was very freshly into it. So he still had like vestiges of what we called worldliness. It was a very bad thing to be worldly. That was like a huge uh pejorative to call somebody worldly. But he was starting to rebel too. I could tell he was pulling away. Although we didn't leave together because I think we knew our marriage was also crumbling. So we didn't leave together. I left with her. But the rancor was starting, the rumblings were starting where I didn't want everyone to know, but I was starting to be shunned by people that knew I wasn't going to meetings and that I was questioning. And again, that I was protective of my daughter and that I was just angry. See, I went from fearful to angry all the time because I couldn't believe the injustices. I wanted my husband to make more money. I wanted us to have a better life. I wanted to get a job. Well, I had jobs, but I wanted to maybe have a career someday. I wanted to be educated. I had all these undone things and I gave all those years away. Well, I didn't give them away, they were taken from me. But it is funny to think about whatever it was that happened in me that didn't happen in other people, except maybe it was just a different level of fear or they didn't know that children were being abused or they swept it under the rug. See, that's the really chilling part is when you actually can allow that to go on. And when I realized it was being allowed and that Julius was actually putting little kids together as arranged marriages. He'd have them like hold hands on a stage, like, this is going to be your future wife, this is going to be your future husband. And that might look innocent on the surface or even cute. People in the cult thought it was cute, but you're introducing the idea of marriage to like 7, 8, 9, 10-year olds. Well, what else are you going to tell them about marriage? You know what I mean? They should be out playing with a ball and a stick. Everybody should be a child. I mean, in conventional religion or whatever, fine, like pass that on to your children or raise them in it, but not as the only thing in life. I mean, I can't speak on that because I don't even know what regular theology looks like. I mean, I was I was baptized as a Catholic, but because my mother joined the cult, I never, was confirmed or anything like that. So I was never a Catholic.
if you were to have had that experience, at least in that way, you would have been able to choose your own name that you could go by if you wanted to, but it wasn't, necessity or essential, or there'd be punishments if you didn't.
In regular religions, you put on a dress and you use your regular name, and then you go to lunch after, and it's you believe in God. See, that's another thing. When I left, I went from everything being God, 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 God 24/7 to nothing, and suddenly I'm an agnostic bordering on atheist because it was all or nothing. It was black or white. It was that, I didn't know Jesus as a Jesus of the Bible, as a benevolent teacher, or you know um everything that even that had to do with the word God brought Julius into my mind. So I mean, really, it was only like several years ago that I was able to find what I wanted to believe and what felt right and fit me. And that was a real process, let me tell you. That almost was, if I can use the word miraculous, to sort of convert my mind into being there is no God. And I mean, nothing against atheists. What do I know? But I know what works for me as far as having some kind of faith compass in my life. Um, but yeah, to go from that, and to go from being immersed in this society, this work, to leaving and having nothing but my daughter. I mean, when I decided to leave, I meant like I left, like with bags of clothing in the back of the car with my daughter's hand in mine, and like, let's go.
I was going to ask if it was sort of like a gradual fade out, or if it was a literally like grab your stuff and leave.
I felt like I had to flee. Like I really felt like I wasn't just leaving, which was radical enough, when you had the audacity to leave. I felt like I was escaping and fleeing. And the more I let myself think about it, the more my mind like started getting almost hyperactive in this sense of, oh, I'm going to go into a normal life. Oh my God, I'm going to venture out into the world. What does that even look like? Uh, and it was just me and my daughter in this grimy apartment that was just awful because it was very, very cheap. And the landlady took pity on me. I remember actually stopping at this house because I saw this red for rent sign outside of it, and it looked like a haunted. It was terrible. There was bats in the attic. The shag rug was so bad that I tried to get it shampooed, and like it all dissolved and it fell apart. It was from like the 60s or 70s. But I knew that we were safe, that I didn't want anyone to know where we were except her father, and that I had nothing to do at that point with my mother or brother or anybody in the cult. And so I went from that to a whole different life almost overnight. Actually, I would say it was overnight because, again, it was just her and I living together. She wasn't in school yet because she was 4, and I had never worked outside of a cult company. So I was like, well, what do I do? And I wound up taking care of elderly people in their homes, which I actually still do today after, well, probably about 80 different jobs. But I just remember protecting her, and we had to move around a few times too. And then she went into school, and I was working more. And then something traumatic happened at that apartment. There was a psychotic kid that lived there. Probably not his fault. I think he was being really badly abused, and he killed our kitten one day. He smashed this kitten on the ground, and that traumatized my daughter so bad that, again, I kind of grabbed her and left. I found another apartment, thank God. And then life pretty much eased into something a little bit normal because it was her and me living there. I met my second husband, and we dated for a while, and we got married, had a child, and the rest is not really history, it's future. But honestly, my life from then till now has just been processing, integrating, deciding what I want to forgive, which is very little, deciding what I'll never forgive, and never minimizing what I went through. because nothing irks me more than people who act like that was some kind of just blip in my life. Like, whoa, that sounds kooky and crazy. And aren't you glad you're free of it and you've got a normal life now and you should get over it and get on with it and stop dwelling on it. And,
And look how well you turned out.
well, you can either get better or bitter in life. And I could have turned into a real cynical sociopath, but I decided I'm not going to give my power away anymore. I get to choose what kind of person I want to be, and I want it to be a good person. And the more I learned about the world and the more I started integrating into a normal life, which still doesn't always feel normal because I know I wasn't like properly socialized as a kid. There's still a lot of fear in me, and there's a lot of guilt, and there's a lot of sadness because of not really having a family. I don't really have a family of origin. I have a handful of relatives that I stay in contact with who completely understand what I went through. My aunt on my father's side, for one, actually, not a lot of others. I do have a handful of cousins who are very nice to me, but my world right now, my idea of family is me and my kids and my grandchildren, because my daughter has gone on to become educated. She's an RN, like a specialist RN, and she's got two beautiful children who I love. So that's my life now, is working and being a mother and a grandmother and writing and being a poet. And that's my joy and passion in life, is to write, which I always said I wanted to. I mean, I've been writing since I was 9. I would just read and write and read and write and escape.
I don't even know what to say.
Are you emotional right now?
I feel like that's a huge thing to talk through. I appreciate you telling us all of those things, but the strength that it must have taken to take your things in the middle of the night and your child with no money and nowhere to go and no family and no support and just leave, and to talk about now how wholesome your life is with how much love you have with your children and your grandchildren around you. Before we hit the record button, you said you really wanted people to know that anybody can do this with the right amount of strength. You're not a superhuman. You don't have superpowers. You're an average person who made the decision to protect their child, and I feel like it's just incredible that you were able to go from having nowhere to go to just having a I don't know. It's just, yeah, isn't it incredible?
It is incredible. I consider my life a miracle, really, that everything kind of turned out and that I let life educate me. I mean, I still consider myself a high school dropout. I don't even have a diploma, let alone go to college. But I'm an articulate, intelligent person who has a heart full of empathy. Not to blow my own horn, but I'm not a perfect person, but I let love lead me. And my daughter is everything to me, and my son is, and the children. And it sounds so corny just to say, like, my goal in life is to be a good person, but um, that's all that matters because we have a short time on this earth. My father had 38 years, and to give those years away to this madman with this vision because he was probably schizophrenic or just, I don't know if you were to actually dissect the brain of one of these cult leaders, what you'd even find. Because can you imagine the audacity to call yourself God? I mean, very few. I've researched cults extensively because I'm fascinated with this. A lot of people that leave cults just really do want to leave it behind and never don't ever talk to me about it again. I know people right now, many people that have left the group I was in who don't talk about it, let alone go on podcasts or documentaries or write a book. And they're very, 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 very quiet about it. And I don't know if it's from fear or shame or embarrassment or just it was so unpleasant, let's get on with it. But I don't mean to ever obsess about it, but I feel like if I can use my early life experiences to help other people who want to know about cults, who have lost family members to cults, who are perhaps trapped in one that don't see a way out, if I can get out, and it doesn't take just saving a child. If you want to save yourself and learn to listen to your own voice, not somebody else's, that's part of the message of my memoir, is learn to believe in yourself, not someone else. The name of the book is going to be The Work, the World, and Me in Between, because it's the work, the world, and the business of my leaving, learning to be part of this world, and then I am part of this world, which is not always a great world, but I'm actually in life. I'm integrated with actual humans that don't fear going to hell every day. And I don't know if there's a heaven or hell. I don't know anything, but I know that, you can be an atheist and still be a good person. Eh, My son doesn't know what he believes, probably nothing, but he's one of the best human beings. And I'm not just saying that. And my daughter, I don't know what she believes or not. We don't really talk much about it. We don't even discuss the cult very much, although she knows I do these things. To this day, I don't know if she watched the documentary that I was in, because it's very upsetting. Um, but when I was approached to do that project, there was no way I was saying no. I mean, I was scared. I can't even tell you how scared I was. I'm going to be on television that's internationally distributed, and I'm going to talk about this stuff that we were not supposed to ever talk about. And I realized the sky was not going to fall down on me, and that I had a responsibility. Nobody else was doing it. There was like me and two other people in this documentary. But for as dramatic as that just got, with my talking about my daughter being a catalyst, I mean, we're very, very, very close. But because of my not really knowing how to parent, because I didn't really have a template of that because of my mom, I just had an innate love. We and those years of just raising her on my own were pretty crazy. Like, it was pretty. I mean, she was fed and clothed and everything, but I went from job to job to job, low paying, barely keeping the lights on. And one of the best things, well, one of two things she said to me, which blew my mind, was she was, "Mommy, I never knew we were poor." And then another time, now that we're both adult women, we have a wonderful relationship. She's almost 34, and we were driving along one day. We used to argue all the time, and we hit a crossroads of communication where we just blew everything open with communication about everything. All the talks that I wish my mother had with me. Everything my mother did not give me, I try to give her. I try to literally be the opposite of the way I was raised. So we were driving along one day, and she said, "You know what? I don't really consider you my mom." And I was ready to burst into tears, like I knew I failed. you know. I, she says, "You're my oldest friend." And that's how I think of her. And, you know, I've battled addiction since all of this has happened. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and they saw me at my worst, and especially my son, because there's 9 years between them. So I was raising him um, after she went to school and everything, and he saw me at my worst. And they're so forgiving, and they're so lovely, and they're so. My son was just here this morning. He makes time for me. He comes over. We eat together. You know, I didn't have a vision for my life, none whatsoever. I certainly could not have seen where I'm at now, where I'm making my dreams come true. I'm publishing my first poetry book. I'm working on the memoir. I'm working. I'm contributing. I'm happy. I'm in recovery. I've forgiven myself for all the ways in which I had to cope with this trauma, because people do things to escape pain. I will never, ever, ever look down on someone struggling with addiction, ever, because to overcome that is one of the bravest things you can do. Leaving a cult was brave for me. Getting sober was brave for me. Doing this is brave for me. And letting go of all the things I can't change, including other people, giving up the idea I will ever have a normal mother or a normal brother. Um, and just not comparing myself to other people who might look on the surface like that's what they have. I'm happy with what I have right now, which is a handful of very dear friends, very supportive people, and um, and a faith that I rediscovered a few years ago. that doesn't really have a name. I wouldn't necessarily say Christian. I suppose it falls under that umbrella. But I have a relationship with nature and with a vast benevolence in the universe, which I think helped lead me out of that cult and become a good person.
That is the end of part 3 of this mini-series. For full-length interviews, ad-free, with early access, you can support the show at patreon.com/thecultvault. If you'd like to get in touch, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.